Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph will begin Yud Dalet Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. We mentioned earlier that one of the Yudches Gzeras was Netilas Yadayim. That Stam Yadayim, hands which weren't washed previously, would be Matam, would be Pasal, rather, the Truma. And then we had a discussion about whether this began with the Talmidim of Shammai and Hillel or Shammai and Hillel themselves. The Gemara's Maskana was the initiated originally Shammai and Hillel. It was not accepted until the Talmidim had their debate in the Aliyas Chananya ben Chizkiya ben Goren, and they were geyser on Netilas Yadayim. Frek the Gemara, Makatish Lema Gazer. What do you mean? This takana of Netilas Yadayim predated Shammai and Hillel and Talmid Shammai and Hillel by many, many years. Shlomo Melech was geyser on Netilas Yadayim. Omer Yehuda Mar Shmuel, Misha Shetikin Shlomo Erevin on Netilas Yadayim. At the time that Shlomo Melech was Masechet, the Gzera, the Netilas Yadayim and Erevin, Yatsa Baskol, Amra came out of Baskol and says, B'ni, Im Chacham Libecha, Yismach Libi Gamani. If you are a Chacham, I will have Simcha as well. Chacham B'ni, my son is a Chacham, V'samach Libi, V'ashivi Charfi Dovid. And I rejoice in my heart, and I'll be able to answer those who disgrace me. Al Kolpanim, we see that Shlomo Melech was Masechet Netilas Yadayim. It predated Shammai and Hillel by many, many years. From the Gemara, also Shlomo Gazer Lekach, and Chanami, the original Takana of Netilas Yadayim, that hands that weren't washed previously would be Matama, but Shlomo Melech was only Masechet that for Kachin, that it would be Matama Kachin, also in who Gazer Afla Truma, and then Shammai V'Hillel, Talmid Shammai V'Hillel were Gazer for Truma as well. Gufa Omer Yehuda Mar Shmuel Yudches Agazer Ubi Yudches Nechlaku. There were 18 Gzeras, the Yudches over the 18 Gzeras, and they argued on these 18, in these 18 places they argued, and Saif they made the Gzer. I affecting more about Tanya Hushu, that says that they agreed, they didn't argue. From the Gemara, that day themselves there was a machlekes. They had a debate, and a machlekes they argued about. But the next day they agreed. They all agreed on these 18 gzeres. Gufa Amar of Huna begimel makamis nechleku Shammai v'Hillel. Shammai and Hillel themselves, as opposed to the Talmidim, Shammai and Hillel themselves only argued in 3 places. Shammai oimer mikav chala. Shammai says, how much flour is there in the batch of dough that one requires one to be mafresh challah? Reshus ha'arisisechem. When we have the dough, we make the dough, we have to be mafresh challah, and that has to be given to the kohen. It's one of the matnas kahuna. How much is required? What's the size, the quantity of the flour in the batch of the dough that requires one to be mafresh the challah? Shammai says a kav. If it's a kav, how much is a kav? What's the size of a kav? In a kav, there are 24 bayim. There are 24 eggs in a kav. So in a kav of challah, there'll be 24 bayim. If there are 24 bayim, the size of 24 bayim, you have a requirement to take challah. That's what Shammai says. They say no, and 2. And the requirement is 2, meaning 48. The They say 1.5 kam, so which would imply 36 bayim. Which would imply 36 bayim is chai b'challah. And l'maisa, that is the halacha. However, the halacha is not in our terms. When we say about bayim, it's not 36. It's 43.2. As we mentioned before, the Torah says the reshis arisosechem. So, what is the requirement to take challah? It's Reshis Arisisechem, the amount which is a portion of the mon. The mon that people that they had in the midbar, each person had, was Asiris ha'efa, was a tenth of an ephah. A tenth of an ephah, and in an ephah there are three saw, and each saw has 6 kavim, and there are 24 bayim in a kav. So you have 432 bayim in an ephah. The size of the mon was asiris ha'efa, a tenth of that. That's 43.2, 43 and a fifth. So it's 43 and a fifth bayim, and that's the halacha, 43 and a fifth bayim. That size of that flour, there is the requirement. If you have that quantity of the flour in the batch of the challah, that's the minimum amount that requires a hafrashas challah. Now, why do we say 36? Because we say 36 because the 43.2 was the size of the measurements that were in the midbar. But when they came to Yerushalayim at a later point in history, the sizes were increased. They increased by a fifth. So 43.2 divided by a fifth is 36. So when we say kava mechsa, we say 36, we're talking in the sizes when the higdilu amidos, when the measurements were increased. So that's the equivalent. They became larger by a fifth. So the equivalent of 36 in the time of Yerushalayim, in the time of the Chacham Yerushalayim, is the equivalent of 43.2, 43 and a fifth of the midbar. Now, higdilu amidos, as we mentioned, there was a measurement in the midbar. They came to Yerushalayim, the measurements increased by a fifth. But then again, at a later time, when they came to Tzipari, it again increased by a fifth. So now, when we had in the Yerushalayim, we said a kavu mechsa, we said 1.5 kavim, which is an equivalent to six lugin, 4 lugin and a kav. So 1.5 is the equivalent to 6 lugin. But when they came to Tzipor, it increased again by a fifth. So the 6 now became 5. The 6th of the middle level of size of the lugin now became 5. Again, you divide the 6, and it became increased by a fifth. So now the 6 now becomes 5 of the larger lugin. That's Chaim B'Chala. Rav Yossi Omer Hey Peturim, 5 you're still potter. Hey V'Oid Chayavim. It has to be a little bit more because Rashi says the bayim in the midbar were a little bit larger than our eggs. So therefore you need somewhat larger to make it equivalent to the bayim that were in the midbar. So this difference of 1.5 kavim, or we say 43.2 bayim, or we say 36 bayim, or we say chameshes revoim, really just, they're the same measurements, but it's a different way of defining it because their measurements are changed in size. They increase a fifth in 2 increments in 2 stages over history. So therefore, this is really the equivalent, when we say chameshes revoim, and sipare is really the equivalent of 43.2, 43 and a fifth. Rav Yossi says you need a little bit larger to make it equivalent to the size of the eggs that were in the midbar. So how much water of the mayim shuvim pasel the mikveh? The amount of the quantity of the water, of drawn water shuvim that pasels the mikveh, is molei hin. A hin is 12 lugin. A hin is 12 lugin, and as we said, there are 4 lugin in a kav, so that's the equivalent of 3 kavin. Of 3 kavin of drawn water pasels the mikveh. Now, why did he use the lashon of hin? Hin is the lashon that's used in the mikra and the psukim, but Chazal don't use hin. They use the measurements of kavin, lugin. Don't use this. Why did he mention hin? Because he has to say it in the lashon of his rebbe, and that was a Messiah that was brought down. That they used that lashon of hin, so therefore that's the lashon that he used as well. So that's how we heard it from Shammai Vav Talion, so he used that lashon as well. Shammai Omer Tisha Kabin, he says no. it's not a hin which is 3 carbon, it's tisha carbon, it's 9 carbon, 3 times as much. They said neither of them is correct. Until 2 weavers came and they were at the Shara Ashba Yerushalayim Mishum Shmaya V'Avtalyan, and they were made that what is the amount is shloisha lugim mayim shuvim paisim mikra. They were made that it's 3 lugim. That it's only 3 lugim that passes the mikveh. It's the smallest share, even 3 lugim, and the chom mekayim, and that's the amount of drawn water that passes the mikveh. What's the other? A woman who has a riyah of dam, she's tmeya, she's a nida, and her touching of kachim, of truma kachim, will be metamet, passel and be metamet. So Shammai says, "Kol anoshim dain shaita." If a woman has a re'iyah, at the time that she sees, now since in those days they were Zohar and Tumantara, they used to be biting themselves constantly. So Shammai says, a woman has a re'iyah, we don't have to be concerned that really there was a re'iyah dam earlier, perhaps that she really was a Tmeya Nida earlier and she didn't realize it until now. We don't have to be chayshish. Therefore, whatever she touched prior to this riyah, we will assume still has a status of being tar. It still remains in its status as being tar. It's only from then on, now that she has a riyah, she knows that she's tmeya. It's from then on that now anything that she touches will become tummy. But we don't have to be concerned about what she touched prior to the re'iyah, that perhaps she really was in nida, she didn't realize it, and she was in nida. That's what Shammai said, dain shait, and it's enough from the time that they saw the dam. The Hillel Leimer, no, you have to be chayshish that she was really tmeya beforehand, and what she touched beforehand will become tomei. How far back do you have to go? Mi pekida le pekida. From the last time she did a bedika, from last time she examined herself, even if it was days ago, you still have to be chayshish that perhaps immediately after the bedika, she really had a re'iyas dam, she didn't realize it, and she was tameya immediately after the last bedika. So anything that she touched after the last bedika is tomei. They said like neither them ella me'es la'es me'mayit al yedei pekida l'pekida or me'pekida l'pekida me'mayit al yedei me'es la'es. They say it is the lesser of the last bedika, but you don't go back like Hillel says days earlier. It's the lesser of the last bedika or 24 hours. So if her last bedika were days ago, you don't go back to the last bedika. You go back. The maximum you go back is 24 hours. From the time that she sees this re'iyah, the most that you will go back is 24 hours earlier, and anything that she touched within that 24 hours. However, if she had a bedika within the 24 hours, you don't go back 24 hours, you go only to the last bedika. So Shammai says you don't have to be concerned at all. Hillel says you go back to the last bedika. The Chum say it's the lesser of the last bedika or 24 hours. We don't have any other cases where they argue. If you bring a korban on Yontiv, do you do smicha, the leaning on the animal, the mitzvah smicha, is it done on Yontiv or not? And we see we had this machlekes. Gemara says no. Yes, it's true that they argued on this case, but we're listing only these 3 cases where there is no other argument. I mean, it's a machlekes between Shammai and Hill. But in a case where it's a friyadike machlekes that the Rabbanim argued for years, like the case of smicha, where they argued much earlier on it, then we're not discussing that case. And in the case of smicha, that was a long-standing machlokes. Yes, Hillel and Shammai argued about it. They argued about it much earlier as well. So that is not in the category of what we're discussing in the 3 places. We still have another place where they argue if a person picks grapes to take to the wine press. Now the halacha is that a food will be mekabel tuma if it's huchshel kabel tumah, if prior to coming into contact with the tumah, it came into contact with a liquid, one of the 7 liquids. If it's not huchshel kabel tumah, it's not makabel tumah. Now, a person, he picks fruit, and if there's some liquid that flows from the fruit, normally a person's not happy with that. He doesn't want it to flow out. It goes to waste. It's not something he's happy with. Now, to come by Hukshel Kabul Tuma, it has to be that the food comes into contact with a liquid. After, for instance, the fruit was picked, it comes into contact with a liquid, but it has to be only in a case where the person is happy with that. He's nicha with it. It's yutan d'mayitain, just like when a person would put the liquid on, he's doing it consciously, so he wants to do it. Now, it doesn't have to be that the liquid comes into contact with the food by his own action, but it has to be dumya, it has to be similar, where he's nicha, where he wants it. He's happy with it. Normally, when you pick fruit, you're not happy with the liquid that flows from it. So normally when if you would pick a grape and for harvesting for the fruit and the liquid flows out, it would not be machsher lekabel tuma because you're not nicha with that. You're not happy with that. The machlokes Hillel and Shammai revolves around the case where a person is picking the grapes for the wine press, specifically for the wine press. Now, sometimes a person would, if he's taking it to the wine press, would take it in a sealed container so that the liquid does not drip out. And if he does it in a sealed container, then he's happy with the liquid because it's going to be squeezed through the juice anyway. And since it's sealed, it's not going to flow out. So the question revolves around the case where he did not use a sealed container. Are we geyser in such a case where it's, let's say, a wicker basket? So essentially, he's not happy with the liquid that flows. It'll go to waste. But are we geyser onto a case where he uses a sealed container? So Shammai says, it is hochsher. We're geyser onto a case where he uses it and it's sealed. And in a case where it's sealed and he's taking it to the wine press, he is happy with the liquid that flows out. There it is machsher. So they say generally it's machsher. Hillel says lo hochsher. So we see that there's another case that they argue. The Gemara says bar minei dahi. No, that's excluded. We list that case as one of the cases that they argue. The hasam kashosik leHillel Shammai, because over there, when Hillel Shammai presented his arguments, Hillel was quiet. He didn't refute it, and therefore, as we say over there, and that's not in the list because he was silent in the face of Shammai's arguments. So therefore, it's not listed as one of the cases that they argue.